Hello and welcome everyone to a Tuesday edition of BlindEyeLive. I do not believe that the yard work that is going on or whatever is going on across the street is coming through my microphone. But I am your host, Hunter King, Blind Eye himself, and today I don't have any news stories pulled up. I'm going to try and do this kind of quickly. I know I'm a little bit early, but I got to get out of here early too, so that's why I'm doing this. I want to talk about, I've talked about them a little bit, but I'm going to go into a little more detail on Jon Gruden and Mike Mayock, the brain trust of the Las Vegas Raiders, and how they are going to be stuck on the treadmill of mediocrity. I don't think there's any escape for Raiders fans. You're probably not going to be bad, but you're not going to be good either. You're just going to be average. You'll have some up games, you'll have some down games. And maybe I'm being a little harsh, but I'll get into that. And then I'm going to do my quarterback rating, like my QB situation ratings for each team going into the season. So I'm going to rank kind of our team's quarterback situations in a way. I'm weighting it towards this season. This isn't like a futures rankings because it would definitely be different. But heading into the season, where I think where I would rank teams based on what they have available to them, and some other surrounding factors. So this isn't necessarily like my or like a 1 to 32 list of the starting quarterbacks, because for a few teams we're not sure who the starter is. So, and the starters could change during the season. But this is just kind of my view of the QB landscape, is what we'll get into later. But I'm going to start with the Raiders. Jon Gruden is a really good football coach. He is. He's a really great offensive mind. He throughout his career has seemed to be a really good motivator who gets more out of his players than other people. That being said, if you're drafting the absolute best players, you're going to get more out of them. I get there are guys that you love and you want to make sure you get. But you don't reach for those guys. And sometimes you're wrong. So if you're reaching for a guy anyway, that doesn't help. So I'm going to go into, these are the first round picks the Raiders have had and used in the 3 draft. Is it 3 or is it now 4? I believe it's 3 drafts for Jon Gruden and Mike Mayock. I think their first draft was 2019. Yeah. So in 2019, their first round picks, they had 3 first round picks. They drafted Clelin Ferrell at number 4, ahead of pass rushers who have been more productive and had higher upsides in, I'll just use, for example, Brian Burns, who went, I believe, 15 to the Panthers. There were several other guys. And there were guys who dropped in that draft. Montez Sweat, because of a bullcrap heart issue, or what seems to be it was a fluke, like a misread heart condition. He fell to 31st when he had elite physical traits. He's been really, really good for the Washington football team. And he's a great run defender who had elite pass rushing tools. He was I think he was my number 6 prospect in 2019, off the top of my head. And the Washington football team was able to trade up into the back end of the first round and snag him at 31. It was ridiculous. It was arguably the best value pick of that draft, at least in the first round. They had the ability to improve their interior defensive line, which was terrible at number 4. Yes, he had gotten injured, but everybody basically had Jeffrey Simmons as a top 5 prospect. He tore his ACL in February. He fell to 19. The Titans snapped him up. He was playing for us by October. And he was a key contributor on our teams the last 2 seasons. He was huge in our 2019 win over the Ravens. And he was really productive this last season. He has immense talent and upside. And I'm blanking on a couple more guys, but there were all these talented players they could have picked at number 4. They picked Clelin Ferrell, who the idea was this is a Clemson guy. He's got really good technique. He's hard motor, hard worker. I get that. There are guys like that all throughout the draft. The guy they drafted in the 4th round, Max Crosby, who's been more productive, was a higher upside player than Ferrell. I don't care that he was from, I think it was Eastern Michigan, Central Michigan. He was from I believe it was a MAC school. Ferrell, I figured would go in the 1st round, but I had a late 1st, 2nd round grade on him. I thought he had the ability to maybe be a Michael Bennett type, base end who kicked inside on passing downs. I thought he was a good prospect. I didn't think he was amazing. He was maybe a little more ready to contribute right away in some regards, but he hadn't even been, in a lot of ways, he hadn't even been that effective. They picked him at 4. Then at 24, they picked Jonathan Abram, a safety out of Mississippi State, who a lot of people had ranked as the top safety. I didn't. I thought he was being very much overvalued. He was a mid-round guy to me. And if you look at the Raiders draft this year, 2 years later, well, one, they let former first-round pick Carl Joseph go last year. He played for the Browns. He's now back. They drafted 3 safeties. Trevin Merrick, my top safety, Divine Diablo, and Tyree Gillespie, 2 of my other favorite safeties. Gillespie was number 4 on my board, or number 5. He's my number 4 or 5 safety. I want to say number 4. Yep. Because I had Merrick, Holland, Cisco, Gillespie. Yeah. So, anyway, and then Diablo was in my top 10. They're not all identical, but they're all versatile and really good athletes at the position. If that Abram pick was a good pick that you believe is still or was still a good decision, you don't draft 3 safeties. You don't. All at really great values, I might add. That's the one thing. I did compliment the Raiders on basically every pick other than Leatherwood. I really liked their draft. But your first-round picks are premium picks. And so the first 2 first-round picks of your tenure, Ferrell and Abram, terrible. Just have worked out terribly. And then Josh Jacobs, their 3rd first-round pick that year at 27, has been really great. But, compared to most of the other top 10 running backs in the NFL right now, how many of those were drafted in the 1st round? Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, and then Dalvin Cook was a 2nd-round pick. Derrick Henry was a 2nd-round pick. Alvin Kamara was a 3rd-round pick. James Robinson was really great last year for the Jaguars. arguably a top 10 or probably a top 10 running back last year. He was undrafted. DeAndre Swift, who's going to be starting for the Lions this year and was pretty good as a rookie, second round pick. Austin Eckler was he like a fifth, sixth round pick? He was either a day 3 pick or undrafted. Look at the 49ers. The running backs they've used, they've either signed free agent guys who weren't high draft picks, or they were late round or undrafted guys for them too. And that's been great for them. Kareem Hunt was a 3rd round pick. Nick Chubb was a 2nd round pick. Joe Mixon was a 2nd round pick. David Montgomery of the Bears was a 3rd, 4th round pick. He was a mid-round pick. You don't have to draft running backs that early. That's why, like Najee Harris, as much as I love him as a player, I didn't like the value for the Steelers. It wasn't the same as like if the Bills or Buccaneers drafted a running back in the 1st round to really get a talented guy at that position, because they don't have holes everywhere or that they're having to plug, or like a ton of holes that they're having to plug that they couldn't get value at other places with like their 2nd and 3rd round picks. The Jaguars drafting Travis Etienne. You just got one of the best running backs from last season as an undrafted free agent. Now you're going to spend a 1st round pick on Travis Etienne. I get that he played with Lawrence in college. I get that he was really productive, but as many needs as the Jaguars have, you're going to take it on a guy who your plan to start off with is he's basically your favorite to be your 3rd down back, and he's going to have to earn more. That's terrible value in the 1st round. So Josh Jacobs, as good as he's been, not good value. Because once again, I'm trying to think or remember the other running backs from the 2019 draft that got drafted. I want to say Montgomery was part of that draft class. Yeah. Montgomery's been really good. If he wasn't 2019, he was a rookie last year, but I'm pretty sure he was a 2019 pick. Devin Singletary was a 2019 pick. He's not amazing, but solid running back. Like, you can get solid, consistent running back play without spending ridiculously high draft picks on it. I mean, you look at Aaron Jones. There's another one. Aaron Jones was 5th, 6th round pick. Heck, A.J. Dillon, who was a late second round selection last year out of Boston College, had a couple really big games. He had a huge game against my Titans late in the regular season when the Packers beat him. I want to say it's like he did a really good Derrick Henry impression. You don't have to spend that 1st round pick. And to me, especially when you're building a team, they had this strength of an O-line. They dismantled their offensive line. They wanted to get younger. But even in doing that, one of the things they did is they acquired Marcus Cannon, who's a little bit younger than some of the guys, but they trade away Trent Brown. They wanted to get a little cheaper there. But they draft Alex Leatherwood at 17. Most people thought might go, like the early part of his range might be the 17th pick of the 2nd round. He wasn't even in my top 50 players. He goes 17th overall. Terrible value. You could have had Tevin Jenkins or Christian Darrisaw, who were both in my top 20. Darrisaw, I thought, was probably going to go top. He was going to go 13th to the Chargers or 14th to the Vikings. That's what I was thinking. Because personally, I thought Sewell and Slater would be off the board by the time the Chargers picked. I thought there was a definite possibility that one, particularly Slater, could be available there. But even then, Darrisaw, the Vikings at 14 seemed like a no-brainer. The Vikings traded back to 23 and still got Darrisaw. That was great. But this is the kind of stuff that the Raiders just do. So then last year, they had 2 first-round picks. They draft Henry Ruggs at 12, first receiver off the board. I like Ruggs. I like his speed and upside that he had, but Jerry Jeudy was a better receiver. CeeDee Lamb was a better receiver. Justin Jefferson was the best receiver in the class, and that proved out last year. You know, people crapped on Kirk Cousins all year last year, but man, he was good enough that Justin Jefferson was able to set rookie records and have arguably the greatest rookie receiving season of all time. And you passed on those guys for Ruggs, who, now he had 452 receiving yards last year despite dealing with some injuries and other things. But to me, you had guys who were more polished, and you had a guy in Nelson Aguilar in the building to be that you had signed in free agency to be that kind of player anyway, even though you're believing Ruggs who is a little more developed than some people would like to say. He wasn't as raw as some people would like to say. But compared to Jeudy and Lamb and Jefferson, he was more tools than skills. He wasn't as ready to produce from day one. And I would say that I'm not dogging the Ruggs pick. I think it was fine, and I thought the value was fine. But in context, he was my 4th receiver. So of course I'm gonna ding that for that reason. So I guess really the value wasn't that great, but whatever. I'll give him a pass there because like that one I understand. The next one was drafting Damon Arnett at 19 when there were better corners available. Last year, this is the list of cornerbacks that went after Arnett. Jalen Johnson out of Utah, who was really, like for a rookie corner, was really good for the Bears. Christian Fulton, who went to the Titans in the 2nd round. Really freaking good to me out of the gate. And he got dinged because he played on a bum wheel for a bum ankle for a lot of the 2019 season. And he was picked on a little more because he had, and while Derek Stingley was a freshman, that guy's unreal. And this year, he will be the first corner off the board, and he will be a top 5 pick. I'm saying that right. I'm going to write that in stone right now. Fulton's not Stingley good, but Fulton is dang good. And when you look at his coverage tape and factor in that he was playing on a bad ankle for a lot of the season, some of the plays he was making while hurt against SEC, like top-level receivers, Christian Fulton was really slept on last year. Trevon Diggs, who went in the 2nd round of the Cowboys, basically started from day one last year. And he was better than Damon Arnett. Arnett was a redshirt senior, which at corner, that's kind of a red flag. Even as loaded as Ohio State's cornerback room had been, you weren't a outside starting corner until you were a 5th-year senior. That's not good. It's like that says something. You had to wait your turn. You got beat out by younger guys. And guys who were your own age were already elite NFL corners. Or at least good NFL corners. By the time you got drafted. That was a bad pick. I had a 2nd round grade on him. All those guys I just listed, and there were a couple more guys. Oh yeah, Jeff Gladney last year, who the Vikings took in the 1st round, but with a later pick in the 1st round. I had Gladney ahead of him. And there's another corner that I'm blanking on as well. At least one more, I believe, that I had rated ahead of him that went after him. And it's just one of those things. I thought Arnett. I had a third round grade on Arnett. You draft him at 19. That's bad value. You made better picks further down the board. And this obsession, like, once again, you look at where these guys are coming from. So they've had 5 first-round picks between the 2019-2020 drafts. You've got 2 Alabama players, a Clemson, two Clemson player, Ohio State player, and then Abram from Mississippi State, which that one's a little bit of a, doesn't follow necessarily the trend, but basically he's taking players from the 3 top recruiting college programs and the teams that are basically always in the playoff. Actually, I think they're the only teams to win the college football playoff since it started. Oh, well, and LSU. So I guess there's been 4. But anyway. And when you look at those picks, now it's still too early to tell with their 2020, but Arnett, I think at best is going to be a solid player. That's not worth, you can get that further down the board. You can get average players anywhere in the draft. Like Arnett did not have upside, and he really didn't have as high of a floor. He wasn't necessarily like a high floor player to me. So that's the other baffler. So then you go to 2021 this year. They only have 1 first-round pick this year, and they spent it on Alex Leatherwood, who wasn't a top 50 player. Now, I could eat my words. Alex Leatherwood did win the Outland Trophy last year. The thing is, he won the Outland Trophy in a season where, for some reason, they ignored Christian Darrisaw. They ignored Tevin Jenkins of Oklahoma State. They ignored a better offensive lineman on his own team, in my opinion, in Landon Dickerson. They ignored Georgia's Ben Cleveland. The Tennessee Volunteers sucked, but Trey Smith was awesome. But there was no way Trey Smith was going to get the award. And then you had Elijah Vera Tucker had to deal with a shortened season. Because I believe he played for USC. I don't think he opted out. Sewell and Slater opted out. Dylan Radins didn't have a season at North Dakota State, and he was a smaller school guy who probably wouldn't, or he was an FCS guy, so he wouldn't have. I don't think he's actually in the running for that one. And then you've also got Liam Eichenberg of Notre Dame, and then Jalen Mayfield had to deal with, the Big Ten shortening their season. Like, there were a lot of deserving players, and I don't know if Alex Leatherwood really was the most deserving Outland Trophy winner this past season. Sorry, that one snuck up on me. Anyway, that's your first round picks for the Raiders. You've had 6 over 3 years. And the best grade you can give any of them, in my view, even in the moment, was give Ruggs a B. Abram wasn't a good pick. Jacobs wasn't, even though you had 3 first-round picks, that wasn't a good value play, especially when you're going into the first year of you rebuilding the team. Farrell was a terrible value who looks even worse now. Arnett's not looking great. Ruggs isn't. Ruggs was okay last year. Give me a second. Okay. Um, I this is what, and this is the kind of stuff that's what locks you into that treadmill of mediocrity, because you have these opportunities to get elite talents, and you pass on those to get solid pieces or whatever that you can get elsewhere on the board. And it's proven out by the way the Raiders have drafted. Further down the board, you get a Max Crosby in the 4th round in 2019, who has a 10.5 sack rookie season. He's not really a number 1 pass rusher, but that year he did have the sack production of one. He wasn't quite as good last year, but I think he was a little dinged up. But between him and, of course, they signed Yannick Ngakoue this offseason, but Ngakoue really hasn't been a true number 1 guy. He's been fairly solidly consistent, but really he's a kind of like Crosby. He'll be a good piece. Now, you put him and Crosby on the same line, maybe Farrell takes a year 3 step up. I mean, it's still possible. These are younger guys, but I think Farrell had been in college 4 years by the time he came out, too. I think he was a redshirt junior. Otherwise, he was a true senior. Like, their safety picks. I think Gillespie, Diablo have great upside, and I thought Merrick was a first-round talent. Like, I actually thought Merrick was a real first-round safety. His tape's much better than Abram. And he's more athletic than Abram. But even so, like, they've been able to hit further down the board. You look at some of their later round picks, like wide receiver Hunter Renfrow, tight end Foster Moreau. Those are the singles you can belt out in later rounds. Because Renfrow showed in college that he has the ability to be a top-end slot receiver. And I think it's like people could say whatever they want about athleticism or this or that. Like, those kind of slot receiver types, when you're throwing like a late-round pick out there for a guy like that, it's like, just do it. Because maybe you miss 1 year on that archetype, but the guy you draft the next year probably is going to hit. Or at least, and if you have a good system and a pretty good quarterback, that guy's more likely to hit. And Derek Carr is a solid quarterback, but he's not an incredible quarterback, but he's solid. And I'll talk more about him when I get into the quarterback rankings. But when you don't take these, and you can take big swings all over the draft. Like, Darren Waller was a projection pick. Although I believe he was picked by the previous regime, but he's broken out in John Gruden's offense. You can hit singles and doubles all around the board, but the first round, you're looking for home runs. You're looking for studs. You're looking for guys who, you're looking for guys who are getting extra bases. I'm using baseball analogies. It's really weird, but that's where you're trying to draft like true cornerstone talents. And so far, and Jacobs isn't that kind of running back either. Like, he's a really good all-around back, but he's not Derrick Henry or Christian McCaffrey. He's more durable than Dalvin Cook, but he's not as good. He's not, and same with Kamara. And out of the 4 guys I just named, only McCaffrey was drafted in the first round. The other guys were second and third round picks. So I'm gonna harp on that. Then you have to look at some of the other strategy they've had. They overpaid for Tyrell Williams in 2019. They cut him this offseason. That 4-year, $44 million contract for a guy who is a little bit long. He's really fast, but he was a tertiary receiving option. You were paying him like you thought he could be maybe not like a full-on number one, but you were paying him more than anyone else was, and you were bringing him in to kind of be your number one receiver. Yeah, that didn't work out. Then last year you brought Nelson Aguilar on a flyer, and he was really good. Now, I think they were smart not to pay him necessarily the money New England did, but they still kind of needed him. New England had a bigger need at receiver, but I don't blame New England for going and getting him. But I know New England's going to use him like in like a specific role tailored to his skills, which the Raiders pretty much did with Aguilar last year. But I don't know. You hit on a receiver and you let him go, just like the one you missed on. Then the one unit that you did have as a strength, your offensive line, you tore it apart this offseason. You trade away Trent Brown, who then took a pay cut at his new destination. You should have just done that. You then trade for Marcus Cannon, who's not as good. Or I think it's Marcus Cannon. Or wait. No. Patriots traded for Brown. They traded Cannon to the Texans. My bad. Raiders didn't even get Cannon. That was my bad. You trade Gabe Jackson, and you trade Trent Brown pretty much for nothing. You trade Gabe Jackson for practically nothing to the Seahawks. And he's still a solid starting guard. Above average starting guard. You trade away Rodney Hudson for practically nothing, who's still one of the best centers in the NFL. He hadn't even slipped like Gabe Jackson. Like, Gabe was one of the best, and now he's above average. Like, Hudson is still one of the top centers in the league. Trade him away for pretty much nothing. I think they brought Richie Incognito back, but he was the oldest of that bunch. And then you do have a couple young tackles, but obviously in drafting Leatherwood that high, makes me think you believe that one of your two young tackles just ain't it. So, like, your receiving core is like probably bottom third of the league. Your offensive line, we'll see, but it doesn't look near as good as it did last year. And considering the idea was to get younger on the offensive line, but then you really only drafted Alex Leatherwood, who's of any count, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have their draft pulled up like maybe I should here. And you didn't heavily invest in the line in free agency or anything. Like, you didn't aggressively go out and replace any of those guys you were trading away with, a younger starter level player in free agency. So there's that. You do have Darren Waller, one of the top 5 tight ends in the NFL. Just like an elite weapon at that position. Josh Jacobs is one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's not top 5, but I'd say he's top 10. Carr's solid. Your defense, though, corners kind of, I like, they should have at least 2 good safeties out of, all the stuff they have at safety. At least 2, they should have, 2 guys who can at least play at an average or above level, you would think, out of all the young safeties they have. They spent big on linebacker last year, but Littleton didn't have as much protection as he did playing for the Rams. Although Kwiatkowski worked out about as well as I expected. He actually, I think, was a little better than Littleton last year, and he was like half the price or somewhere close to that, half to 2/3. And the defensive line's still pretty trash, or like it's not great. It's better than it was like 2 years ago, but they let Maurice Hurst walk, who was one of the late round swings that they nailed, and I want to say they cut him. I don't I just don't understand it personally. And to me, the Raiders are going to be destined, because I get this whole Gruden grinders thing. Like, I like, the grind it mentality. But at some point, you have to realize that, I'm in a lot of ways I look like Al Davis, and I'm drafting like Al Davis did. Because honestly, if you look at what they're doing, to me, these are very Al Davis picks. It's either some guy who is really great athletic measurables or a really good pedigree. That's it. And occasionally, some guy who is from a smaller school who's a pretty good athlete with pretty good tape, like a Max Crosby. So, but I did overall like the draft a little more this year, and I do feel like in some degree maybe that came from Mayock. But their offseason also still confused me too. So, I mean, there's that. I just think the Raiders are going to be a middle of the road team. To me, you're looking at 7-9 to 9-7 every year. And I'm being a little nice with 9-7 because if you look at their division, they're having to deal with the Chiefs. The Chiefs remade their offensive line this offseason and got creative to do so. And they took upside swing on Trey Smith in the 6th round. Despite, there being worries about apparently the blood clots that he has gotten over and come back and been an elite player after. So, I don't know. I just see and then you've got the Chargers. The Chargers have a elite young quarterback prospect. Herbert, with arguably the best season any rookie quarterback has had. Well, statistically speaking, he broke tons of records. And they improved this year. Once again, another team that needed to improve, particularly at the offensive tackle position. What did they do? They drafted Rashawn Slater at 13. They drafted the best player available at the position, which maybe the Raiders really believe Alex Leatherwood. Well, obviously, they believe Alex Leatherwood was the best player available, But for the Raiders, like coming into the offseason, that offensive line really wasn't that big of a need. They turned it into a need. That's what's amazing. The Raiders turned a strength into a need. It's kind of maddening. So that's enough on the Raiders rant. I'm going to get into my quarterback rankings. Oh, yeah, I'm doing good. So, let me kind of run down my rules. Well, let me take a drink real quick. Love some sweet iced tea. So, this is kind of my rules for quarterback rankings. Or for this, I touched on it earlier, but this is kind of how I would go about this, or how I'm going about this. So this is about teams, quarterback situations. So for me, do you have an elite talent? What is he getting paid? So, like, is he providing excess value? Of course, age plays a factor too. I mean, I am weighting this towards this season, but I am going to put you in or higher than another team if team's got a ho-hum dude in there, but you have like a younger quarterback. Maybe he's a little less proven, but he's still like developing. Like, here's an example. I'm not going to rate Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater higher than I'm going to rate Sam Darnold. Because one, I think, like, I believe Darnold's better than Locke. And Bridgewater, even though he has this track record of somewhat stable play, he's not putting you over the top. Whereas I think Darnold is in the best situation he's been, and he's gonna show how good he is. So maybe this isn't the best. Our best example. Or here's another example, because these guys are in the same tier. I have Baker Mayfield rated ahead of, say, Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill has been really, really great the last 2 years. Baker been kind of up and down. Last year, he improved throughout the season. He was really good by the end of the year. I think he's going to take another step forward, and I think he's in a really good situation that's going to help him take that next step forward. Whereas Tannehill, his job is probably going to be a little bit more difficult this year because his receiving talent has dropped. So there's some situational stuff that's at play, but for the most part, it's about what I think about the quarterback skill level, what he's getting paid, his age. There's, of course, injury concerns as well, because in some cases, there are guys who I'm going to rank higher, because I also kind of have like tiers in mind as well. So there are guys who are kind of in a similar tier, but I'm going to drop him below these other guys in the tier because, well, like, people aren't really talking about it, but Tom Brady had a knee procedure after the Super Bowl. That man is 43 or going to be 43 at the beginning of the season. I'm just saying, a minor knee procedure for him is a bigger deal than probably an ACL tear, or to me is almost as big a deal as an ACL tear for younger players. And it's definitely more a bigger deal than that same knee procedure on a younger player. So, because I believe this was on the same knee that he had his ACL torn back in, what was it, 2008? Yeah, week 1 of the season after they went undefeated and lost in the Super Bowl. I want to say, so it might have been a cleanup procedure for that, but that's still not necessarily great news, but I'd prefer that to some new issue. Or like Joe Burrow's coming off a torn ACL. He was playing really, really great football, but I'm going to put him behind some guys I might not have otherwise simply because of that ACL tear. Rookie quarterbacks are going to get a little bit of a ding here just because we don't know yet. We don't necessarily know how ready they are. And any rookie quarterback who is paired with a veteran, I'm going to be grading more on the veterans present in some cases. So But let's just get into it, and you'll probably and I'll talk about my reasonings for this. So I'm gonna kind of put like my first tier, or because there's kind of multiple tiers in this, but like my top 8 quarterbacks, I'm gonna just kind of run through them real quick. Because it does, to me, it does get harder the further you get down. I mean, there are certain spots, like for me, it's really easy to say Patrick Mahomes. Like Kansas City is number 1. They've got Patrick Mahomes. Chad Henne actually, when Mahomes was knocked out of a playoff game, like Henne was able to win them that game. You've got a couple young upside options like in Jordan Ta'amu, and I'm trying to remember. I think they signed someone in undrafted free agency. But anyway, like I like Jordan Ta'amu a lot as a developmental backup. So, but you've got Patrick Mahomes. You're good. The Bills are at number 2. Well, and the Kansas City has him locked up for whatever. Yes, it's a lot of money, but Mahomes is ridiculous. His first 3 NFL seasons might be, or as a starter, might be the best first 3 seasons anyone's ever had in their first 3 seasons starting as a pro. After that, I have Buffalo with Josh Allen. Allen was ridiculous last year. He's turning into the super weapon that people were really, or that scouts were dreaming he could become. He has pretty much every tool in his toolbox that Mahomes has, which is crazy to say. And he's still on his rookie deal. They've started extension talks, but like this guy's going into year 4, still has his 5th year option, and then whatever they add to it, which has given them great flexibility as a team. They're super stoked. At number 3, I'm going to go with. Oh, sorry. At number 3, and this is where it gets kind of sticky because to me those were the 2 or my 2 easy ones. So now you've got to. The Rodgers stuff is really complicated because from a pure talent standpoint, there's an argument Rodgers is 2 because originally, like, I'm sitting here like you've got Rodgers and then you've got a young developmental quarterback with a lot of tools in Jordan Love, and I'm like, talent-wise, that's great. The problem is there's turmoil around this because you drafted the guy, and it seems like you've done everything you can to not commit your future to Rodgers, and not as well as not maximize the talent around him while you do have him. And yes, he has, this season and 2 more seasons remaining on his contract, but none of the money's guaranteed, basically, particularly after this year. I think only, there's part of his money this year is guaranteed, and then there's no more guaranteed money. I mean, it's great that you drafted this quarterback that you seem to believe in, but at the same time, obviously he's not Patrick Mahomes, or you would have shipped Rodgers out of town this offseason. Like Kansas City did with Alex Smith, who was coming off of the best year of his career and, a fringe MVP candidate type season in 2017. Going into 2018, I mean, you trade him. So Rodgers instead are actually won MVP, which is great, but maybe Rodgers, and I think a lot of stuff's been really unfair to Rodgers, and people have not done enough going after Schefter over this. Like, I mean, he made up a conclusion to a story, and you could say yes, all this stuff is going on, but he made definitive statements about things that had not happened, and as far as anyone knows, has not happened. Rodgers is meeting with these people. He's trying. It seems like they are trying to work things out. I think the Packers are trying to play this kind of limbo game between him and Love, like now and the future. Rodgers is rightfully so focused on the now. I think to a degree he understands where the Packers are coming from. Because they did this with Brett Favre and him. Doesn't mean he has to like it, though, either. So even with all the drama, I'm still going to put the Packers at 3. Because if Rodgers chooses to play for you, you have the reigning MVP. If not, you will get a massive trade haul, and you have a young quarterback on your roster who you just recently said you think still has a ways to go, but you at least have a guy who has tools that you like, that you believe you can mold into something. Whereas in Seattle, you have, who I have 4, you have Russell Wilson, who's awesome, but you don't have anything behind him. And there has been some turmoil there, but it seems like that's worked out. And Seattle has invested heavily in the offensive line, and they've got Lockett locked up. They drafted DK Metcalf. That's been awesome. And I thought they nailed undrafted free agency. They got 2 more weapons for Russ. So as far as I'm concerned, Russ is elite quarterback, one of the best in the game. Number 5, you've got Lamar Jackson. Lamar's still on his rookie deal. He's basically at the same spot as Josh Allen. Like, the team's probably already talking with him on extensions because he's going into year 4. Still got that 5th-year option, though. He's got an MVP in his belt. The thing is, and you could say that there was a difference between the Ravens and the Bills, is the Bills' weapons got better for Allen in year 3, whereas the Ravens' weapons didn't get any better going into year 3. And if anything, maybe it's like took a slight step back, at least for parts of the season. Really, it's more that the Ravens got a little bit younger as well. But they took steps to improve his weapons this offseason in signing Sammy Watkins, drafting Rashad Bateman in the first round. Yes, they traded Orlando Brown, but they signed Alejandro Villanueva. I really like a lot of the Ravens' moves. So Lamar should be in a better position. This guy was an MVP recently. Then at 6, I'll put the Bucs at 6 with Brady because you've got the greatest of all time. I only dinged it and dropped it because I would have put it higher if it wasn't for that little bit of knee surgery. And at this point, any year could be the year that the bottom falls out. Do you want to bet against Brady? No, but you still have to remember, Father Time is undefeated. He is going to get a victory soon. Every year it becomes more and more like we're closer to the inevitable. We don't know how much closer, but obviously we're closer. And a small minor knee surgery after the end of, a season like that. And Brady had incredible talent around him. One of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Probably the best, the best group of receiving weapons in the NFL. An elite defense. And this is a very young team around him, too. It's young and talented. They're getting a ton of excess value on a lot of guys who they've hit on who are on rookie deals. And a couple of guys who they've had a couple of guys who were on ridiculously cheap contracts, like below market value contracts. So, or they've spent smartly. They've extended the right players. Like, it really is. Like, Brady's in a great situation, but I'm not going to drop him any further than 6. Then 7 and 8, you have Dak Prescott. Yes, he's coming off a big injury. But Dak was on an incredible pace at the beginning of last season. Like, he was going to be an MVP candidate last season before he got hurt. Matthew Stafford is in the best situation he's ever been in his career. Coming into the season, he missed some time with injuries last year. So that's my top. Those are my top 8 guys. I think there's no question that those are the top 8. You could make an argument for the next guy, but all of these guys have multiple years in the league and either have shown a track record of improvement or sustained success. Like, we've seen the development arc for Allen. That's why I have him so high. And while, yeah, Lamar's dipped a little in year 3 compared to year 2, I don't blame a lot of that on him, personally. And then for the rest of these guys, multiple years of elite play are the reason they're up there. So then you get into the next tier. And these are the guys who... Some of these guys can absolutely be on the level, or have in the past been on the level of the guys ahead of them, or could make the leap ahead of those guys because of development. I'm leading that tier with, and I'm talking about the quarterbacks, but it's also the teams. Like, the Rams have a decent backup for Stafford. Dallas, their backup situation is as good as last year with Andy Dalton, but I also don't expect Dak to get hurt like that again this year. The Bucs drafted a young backup in Kyle Trask to develop behind Brady. Because I didn't talk about every team's backup situation necessarily, because for a lot of it, it's not necessarily, it's not necessary in all cases. Like, I'm mostly going to talk about backups if I think it gives them a boost, or if they just have, like, the worst backup situation in the NFL. So anyway, moving to the next tier, you've got Herbert with the Chargers is leading off, like, kind of that next tier. Like, he's my 9th guy. He was just so good as a rookie. I don't like their backup situation as much with no Tyrod, but Herbert, I think, even if it's like, I'm not saying his numbers will be better this year, but he should be a better quarterback this year. He's got a new and probably better coaching staff in place, and a better offensive line, and hopefully a healthier group of weapons. He does lose Hunter Henry, but he still has Keenan Allen. He still has Austin Eckler. And they drafted, and maybe they were a little bit of reaches, but they drafted Josh Palmer in the 3rd round, who I think will be a solid tertiary receiver and downfield receiver. Trey McKitty has a lot of upside at tight end. So, but Herbert was just so good as a rookie, and I don't see why he would get any. I honestly don't see like why he would regress in year 2. If anything, I think there were obvious things that he could have done better last year, and there were some obvious mistakes that he made. And if he trims some of those, if he's making slightly better decisions this year, obviously that's him improving as a quarterback. So, and if like his level of play last year is a floor for this kid, holy crap. I mean, really, like the Josh Allen 2.0 is, they don't necessarily have the same personality, but I mean, like, you're looking at the tools, it's like he's almost like a clone. So yeah. 10, I've got former NFL MVP Matt Ryan. He's got great weapons. They Yeah, they lost Alex Mack, but they did. They are kind of moving some pieces on the O-line. They drafted Kyle Pitts, who is my top-rated player in the draft, like highest-graded player in the draft. That's going to help him out. Brand new coaching staff who is going to help Ryan. They are going to improve. Like, this is going to make Arthur Smith is going to make Matt Ryan's life a lot easier. We're going to see this system, because Arthur Smith comes from comes from that Shanahan tree. This is the same offensive system that Matt Ryan won an MVP and almost won a Super Bowl running. So, and I think to a degree, like, we've underrated Matt Ryan, because people talk about, well, the Falcons are choke artists or this or that. There are a lot of times where, like, Matt Ryan is having to make a play. It's like, if he doesn't, like, they don't make a play anyway. It's like he's either having to force something or nothing's going to get done anyway. And they're going to lose anyway. So, I still believe in Matt Ryan and those weapons there. There's no reason they should trade Julio, as far as I'm concerned. It would to me, to trade Julio, it would take a offer that would be stupid to turn down. Like, that, it would take an offer that a team would be stupid to offer for me to trade Julio Jones. Which, of course, that rounds my top 10. Then I've got Baker Mayfield at 11. Baker improved last year. Very much could jump Matt Ryan. And to me, he's poised for a breakout. And poised to be a guy who moves up the board regardless of how well other people play. I think he has the weapons. He has a quality coach. Like, he has continuity in the coaching staff. And competent continuity in the coaching staff. I think Baker's going to take a really big jump in year 4. 12th, I have Ryan Tannehill. He's been really good with the Titans. We'll see how well things go without Arthur Smith, although it seems like the offense isn't going to change much. But he doesn't have the weapons. We'll see. Tannehill's a guy who, it's volatile. He might drop. But it might not be his fault either. 13, I have Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray has some big flashes, and he has great talent, but that offense still hasn't been as explosive in the passing game and as consistent in the passing game as I would have expected. Kyler Murray can still improve a lot with his consistency as a passer and his ability to make, and still his abilities to make plays within the pocket. And they've definitely improved the offensive line. They've invested in continuing to improve the receiving corps, bringing in DeAndre Hopkins last year. They've drafted a bunch of guys. I loved them picking Rondale Moore. He's a far more explosive playmaker than Andy Isabella, even though I still like Isabella. Moore is a real weapon. They brought in A.J. Green over the offseason to be kind of like a veteran. Very much, I'm going to say, like, kind of possession receiver and take that Larry Fitzgerald role. Still have Christian Kirk there. But there's still things we need to see more from Murray outside of just the highlights. And then there's Joe Burrow. I have at 14. Burrow was looking awesome last year before the torn ACL. You draft a guy number 1 overall and you see him play as well as he did over the first half of the season. That's what you're wanting. The injury kind of knocks him because I probably would have put him ahead of Murray and Tannehill otherwise. Especially on the pace he was, and could have ended up higher. But I'm going to leave him at 14. And then that's kind of like my second tier. Then you've got kind of, to me, you have this third group of guys, and they're definitely good enough to win with, and guys who have been a part of winning big in the past, but there's different question marks about him, whether it's durability. Well, for a lot of these guys, there's some durability concerns. There's up and down play, where it seems like they're a little more beholden to their supporting cast. They're a little more game managers than game winners. Not that, and I hate like that term being used as a bad thing. If you're great at managing the game, making great decisions and consistently making the right decisions that put your team in a better position to win, that's great. You just might not be able to make certain plays that other quarterbacks can make who are also doing those other things very well, or doing these same like decision-making things well. So in this, I start off the category with Jimmy Garoppolo. When Garoppolo's healthy, the 49ers win. They win a lot. He just missed one really big throw in a Super Bowl. But he's 15 for me. And I know I'm talking a lot about the quarterbacks. I didn't even really talk about the backups for the quarterbacks in the previous tier. Most of them, it's like the backup option is, well, a lot of those quarterbacks are younger quarterbacks anyway, so it's like, well, they're, we're banking on this guy's improvement. So, and a lot of those teams don't have notable backups anyway. So, but for the Niners, they drafted Trey Lance. So you have Garoppolo, but then you have Lance. We don't know how quickly he'll develop. I don't think he's as raw as some people are saying he is. There are certain things he definitely needs to improve on, but like mentally speaking, he's a pretty sharp quarterback. I don't think he's as far behind the Lawrence, Jones, Wilson group as Fields is. But I think he needs to hone his arm talent a little more, kind of like a Josh Allen. There are some ways like he's as raw as Josh Allen, but there are other ways where he's not as raw as even Josh Allen was coming out. I think Lance was a great pick, and I think Shanahan, he will add dimensions to Shanahan's offense with his arm talent and his athleticism. So he gives them upside for the future while they have great stability for the now in Garoppolo. And depending on how quickly Lance develops, that upside could reach. Who knows when that upside hits? It could even hit during this season, although it'll probably be next. Or I'd lean more likely to it hitting next year. Of course, or then at 16, I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. This guy's had some big passing seasons before. Gary Kubiak's son, who's from that Shanahan tree, but he's younger, probably has some more kind of newer ideas. This offense has been working there. They've beefed up their offensive line over the last 2 seasons. Improved the interior. Now they have a lot of young. Actually, they have more than 5 starting caliber offensive linemen in my opinion, which is awesome. They have one of the best 1-2 punches at receiver in the league. They have a really good young tight end in Irv Smith. They have a great backfield led by Dalvin Cook, one of the most electric running backs in the NFL. And they have a defensive-minded head coach who will be getting some guys back from opt-outs, some guys back from injuries. They've got some young developable talent there in the secondary and on the defensive line. We'll see what happens there, but just from the quarterback position, like Kirk Cousins, is he flawed? Yes. But I think he has more upside than some of the quarterbacks that are kind of in the same tier. Like his best in terms of the plays he can make and that he has made the pass. To me, he's a higher upside player than Jimmy Garoppolo. But his floor has been lower. And I tend to be more of a defend Kirk Cousins kind of guy. Then at 17, I've got Derek Carr. Derek Carr's been really good. I think he's either just not had weapons, had to deal with bad coaching staffs, sometimes both at the same time, and he's been under a lot of scrutiny, and a lot of it unfairly. So I'm kind of on the defend Derek Carr side, but then you've got his family on social media, and they are just insufferable at times. So it's like, okay, like we get it. He gets criticized a bit, but like that was legitimate like criticism. Like, don't just go hounding people on Twitter. Like you're making and fighting battles for your son or brother. Like, chill out, people. But I mean, I like Derek Carr. His issue is a lack of weapons outside of, or has been basically a lack of consistent weapons outside of Darren Waller the last few years. And before that, Amari Cooper. He basically had one consistent option, and Amari Cooper at times was kind of inconsistent. So, but I would attribute that more to there not being anything else around Cooper at the time. So there was a lot of pressure on him and a lot of defensive attention on him. Then at 18, I'm going to go with Ben Roethlisberger because of just the lengthy track record he's had, and he doesn't have some of the low points of like the next quarterback I have over the past couple years. I mean, he missed most of 2019 with the elbow thing. He came out pretty good in the beginning, but he tapered off, and he kind of has. It seems like he's in that kind of Drew Brees and that last year with the Patriots kind of Brady, where it's like, it just seems like their arm's okay, and then like at a certain point in the season, it's just done. And Ben's very much at the decline phase, the end of his career, but he knows how to play the position really well. He knows that offense inside and out. He has really good weapons. And maybe a further removed from that elbow injury and a full offseason where you're healthy and you're not having to rehab and you're just able to kind of rest and work in the offseason, do whatever, maybe he'll be better this year. But at his age, I don't know. I'm going to put him at 18. I'm going to give respect to Big Ben. And Pittsburgh, they seem to like Mason Rudolph. They brought in Dwayne Haskins, so maybe there's some upside behind Ben there, but the Steelers were comfortable enough bringing him back, and there's so much history between him and everyone in that organization that I think they're happy with this being the scenario for this year. But they got to draft someone next year, I think, early. I think they're going to have to make an ups. Mason Rudolph just doesn't look like the guy. And Dwayne Haskins, I'm just saying he's not. He's no one's guy. 19, I have the Colts with Carson Wentz. He's had a rough last couple years, especially last year. I'm going to blame it on Peterson and just the injury bug that has smited the Eagles' receiving core and offensive line over the past 2 seasons. That's the biggest issue to me. It's like maybe Wentz has made some questionable decisions at different times, but when you have no time to throw and no one open, sometimes you just got to see, well, he's not open, but let's see if he can go and get the ball. I think he's in a much better situation. Colts wouldn't have made the trade if they're not comfortable. Frank Reich was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles while Wentz was lighting the world up and had them and led them to one of the best records in the league before he got hurt. And the year they won the Super Bowl, like a lot of the reason they were in that position was because of how well Wentz had played. Wentz was an MVP candidate that year, probably the MVP favorite when he got hurt. So I'm going to go with Wentz there. Jacoby Brissett might be back. Oh, no. Brissett's not on the roster. But they did draft Jacob Eason last year. They drafted Sam Ehlinger this year as well. So they have two young developmental quarterbacks back there. Not that I necessarily believe in either of them. Like, Eason has great tools, but he's never really answered questions about, like, is he really dedicated enough to be, like, he hadn't really put those tools consistently to elite use. There's a reason a guy like Jake Fromm took the starting job or was able to wrest the starting job away from him. Yes, Eason got hurt, but Fromm was so good, like, Eason didn't even try to compete because he knew he couldn't. He knew he wasn't better. That's why he transferred out. And then Ehlinger, I just don't see. Like, I don't see an NFL quarterback there. But they do have two young backups. So, I think the Colts are happy. Then, I'm going to put the Lions at 20. Say what you want about Jared Goff. This man has been to a Super Bowl. He's put up really good numbers. Yes, he had the McVay system. He had great weapons. He still optimally used those. And was better than... And I don't think just any quarterback can succeed and play at the level he was playing at for large stretches of time just because they're in Sean McVay's offense with those weapons around them. I think that's foolish. But there's a reason I have Stafford as my number 8 and Goff at 20. Stafford's a better quarterback. Stafford is more talented. Stafford is just simply better. He's more experienced, obviously, but like Stafford's is a better caliber player. And there's a reason. Like, what was his name? Wolford? Even when Goff was kind of healthy, like, he wasn't necessarily their guy. Like, the Rams decided he wasn't their guy. So, to a degree, that kind of puts you where you're at. And I would say 20, like, he's a solid starting option. Or at least I would regard him as such. We'll see what happens in Detroit. He does not have the receiving talent or just the team talent in general around him. He does not have... We'll see how good their offensive scheme is, but, I mean, I would imagine it's not on par with, like, Sean McVay. So... That's my number 20. And then after that, I would put the Patriots at 21. You have a former MVP in Cam Newton, who the last few years has kind of a lengthy injury history. He's been kind of up and down. He's got better weapons, obviously, this year than he did last year. We'll see how good he is, because he has a lot of upside. Then you've got Mac Jones, who they just drafted with the 15th pick. Mac Jones, if any quarterback has been drafted since Tom Brady that could be considered a clone of Tom Brady, he's probably the closest match. It's him and Joe Burrow, to me. Of course, they're both more athletic than Brady. That was almost bad. Of course, like, I'm not saying Mac Jones is the next Tom Brady either, but they have a lot of similarities, and a lot of the criticisms about Mac Jones, I'm just sitting here like, people use those against Brady. And most of them were also applicable to Joe Burrow last year. That's another funny thing to me. So I am I'm on board the Mac Jones train. I think the Patriots are really excited, and they still have Jarrett Stidham on their roster too. So I think they're happy about their quarterback situation, and they have a lot of upside at their quarterback situation as well, even being at 21. So, because you have a former NFL MVP who's, just entering his early 30s, and has immense physical tools, and then you have a young signal caller who has all of the same traits that the greatest of all time, whom you drafted and developed and watched dominate for 2 decades. Like, you drafted a guy who looks very similar to that same player at a similar age. So that's why I have the Pats 21. At 22, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing around and remembering who all I still have left. At 22, I'm gonna put the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence has started there, and so based on purely the rookie, this would be the best, or because he was the number 1 pick, seems like the safest one. Lawrence has the most value of the rookie quarterbacks. The reason I'm putting Jacksonville at 22, though, is because I really like Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is better than multiple starters around the NFL, and that is your backup for Lawrence. I think that's an awesome situation to be in, or to have for the Jaguars. You have one of the best, highest quality backup quarterbacks in the league. And then you have one or the greatest quarterback prospect that has come out of college since Andrew Luck. That's pretty nice. So I think it's like Jacksonville. I mean, before the draft, Urban Meyer's or when asked, I can't just say that we're drafting Lawrence right now, but it seems very much like we're headed in that direction. Then at 23, I've got I kind of have to go with the Saints. What the heck was that? At 23, I kind of have to go with the Saints. You have Winston, who has incredible upside. He also has incredible downside. There's a reason the Bucks moved on. This guy threw for over 5,000 passing yards, and 33 TDs in a season, which is incredible. Except he also threw 31 interceptions and had a crazy number of fumbles too. This man is the living embodiment. He's the human equivalent to an Apple turnover. Winston's going to throw you out of the game, or he's going to play you out of the game just as much as he plays you into it. You'll be in the game because of him until he takes you out with a baffling decision with the football. Or because he held on to the football for way too long. So, and then Taysom Hill doesn't have near the passing upside of Winston. He's probably going to give you a better, more consistent level of play, though. And his running ability is great, but I don't look at Taysom Hill as really a starting quarterback. I don't look at him as Steve Young. I don't. So but I'll give them 23rd. Now I've changed this since when I was thinking about this yesterday evening. Because at 24 I have Miami with Tua Tagovailoa. I've also moved someone else as well. So these three teams have kind of been moved around. 24, I've got. Let me see. Let me double check that I've got that right. 21, I put New England. Right. Sorry, I'm like crossing off all the teams right now, like down the line that I've already talked about. Oh yeah, no. I put the Patriots at 21. I put the Jaguars at 22. New Orleans 23. Yeah. So then Miami at 24. I think Tua is going to take a big step forward. He was coming back from that big hip injury. He was still getting his body right. That offensive line was young. Robert Hunt was a little too slow to play right tackle, as far as I'm concerned. I love Robert Hunt, by the way. He's going to be awesome improving like the line moving into guard. I think Austin Jackson, he was very raw, but he's going to be really good continuing at left tackle. They get Liam Eichenberg to play right tackle. I think he just a plug-and-play starter, going to upgrade there. Their weapon, like his receiving weapons, are great. I wish their running back room was a little bit better, but whatevs. I think Tua is going to take a step forward in year 2. And I think they upgraded offensive coordinator as well over the offseason. Because I believe Chan Gailey was the offensive coordinator last year. He decided to retire. I think that getting a new, younger, fresher mind in there is going to help. I'm trying to remember exactly who they hired it off or who their offensive coordinator is, though. Oh, dadgummit. Because I was looking at it last night and I can't remember. So it sounds kind of funny I say that and then I'm like, they upgraded offensive coordinator. Well, who's their offensive coordinator? I don't know. But I'm gonna put Tua at 24th. Out of the 4 first round quarterbacks, obviously Love didn't play last year, but out of the 3 that did play and see significant time, he was not the best, but he had some big moments. He outdueled Kyler Murray in a very important game late in the season. The Dolphins should have been a playoff team last year and were not. They were based on record, like this team was too good, shouldn't like to not be in the playoffs. But alas, last season was crazy. But I think that situation is better moving forward with that younger quarterback who has experience, and I just think is going to take a big step forward in year 2. Then at 25, the guy who he's taking over for full time finally now, I'm putting Washington at 25 because Fitzpatrick was pretty good last year, and Taylor Heineke was pretty good in that playoff game against the Bucs. And they've still got Kyle Allen as their 3rd quarterback, and Allen has had some good starts in the NFL. So I'm not super concerned about or should I say they've got depth at the position, but Fitzpatrick is also at the age where, I mean, he's not really going to get any better. You would definitely be shocked if he got any better. And he doesn't have, his physical tools aren't quite as good as they were like 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. But I'm going to put him there just out of respect. But there's not like a ton of like long-term upside. Like Tyler Heineke he's a backup quarterback. Kyle Allen is a backup quarterback. Like they're spot starters, but you know, if there's a major injury, it's like your season's going. Like your ceiling for your season has dropped. And even with Fitzpatrick has never been like yeah, this team's a contender. It's like maybe this team's, a contender for a playoff spot. So like that's just what I'm gonna say there. Then 26. Now we're getting into kind of like where the unknowns in the bottom tier. And I know there's a name that you're probably shocked hasn't come up yet. We'll get to them, and we'll get to that. So real quickly to kind of get through this bottom tier. Simply because of Teddy Bridgewater's experience and because Drew Lock has dealt with so many injuries which he's missed time to injury, but his two best receiving weapons got hurt and missed pretty much most of the season last year. You had Cortland Sutton, who went down with a season-ending injury. Noah Fant missed a lot of the season, and both of those guys, like Sutton had been really good the year before and started off the year really good. Fant had started off the year incredibly well, and just unfortunately they went down. I think Locke still has a lot of upside. I really like him. He was my second quarterback in the 2018 or the 2019 class behind Kyler Murray. And even then, I still had a late first-round grade. Like, he went kind of in that range that I thought he would go in. But he's gonna have to prove it this year. Like, you're not confident in him. Teddy Bridgewater. If he's starting, he's one of the lowest in. He has really no upside as a starter. As a backup, he is one of the highest in backups. But once again, you're hoping you're using him as a backup for a better quarterback. You're hoping he gets beat out. So if Locke beats him out, that's good for the Broncos. Because at least Locke should then be competent. And with the weapons they have, he has the tools to use them to peak effectiveness between Hamler's elite speed, Sutton's great downfield and contested catch abilities, Judy just being a all-around great receiver, and Fant being a matchup or just a terribly hard matchup for and a potential top 5 tight end this season. I mean, and they've got a decent running back room with Melvin Gordon. Well, they've got a really good one now. You've got Melvin Gordon and Royce Freeman, who are then joined by a guy who I like better than both of them in Javonte Williams. But once again, we know what Bridgewater is, and it's not very exciting. It's something you're wanting to improve on. And Locke, this guy's going to have to show the improvement this year. But that's 26 for me. 27. 27, you're looking at. Actually, let me flip that. They're 27. The actual 26, I'm actually going to go with the Bears. And you could move the Bears up a spot or two, whatever you want. But the Cowboys had a lot of injuries last year. Andy Dalton, was injured the year before that, whatever. Andy Dalton has has shown more ability than Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback in the past, but he's a little bit older. And I mean, you're not necessarily enthused that he's your starting quarterback. They've got Nick Foles on the roster, but I think our second honeymoon phase with Nick Foles is over, for sure. And then you do have the upside of Justin Fields, and that's why I probably should put them, and maybe I should move them ahead of Washington even, but I'm going to put them ahead of the Broncos. Because Locke has upside, but Fields has more upside. And I like Dalton better than Bridgewater, so I'll put them at 26, or the Bears at 26, and then we'll put the Broncos at 27. 28. You've got... So we're down to the bottom 5. I'm going to put Carolina at 28 because I believe in Sam Darnold. I do. I believe in Sam Darnold. I believe he's in the best situation he's been at as a quarterback. He's got a great head coach in Matt Rule there. One of the up-and-coming young minds in offensive coordinator Joe Brady. Christian McCaffrey's going to be back healthy. They drafted Chuba Hubbard to be his primary backup. That's great. Like their offensive line. Tight ends, still kind of a question mark there. Although they have upside at the position. They did lose Curtis Samuel, but you have a healthy DJ Moore, healthy Robbie Anderson. You drafted Terrace Marshall, and you got him way later than I thought he was going to go. They drafted, I believe, another receiver later who's more of a slot type. I believe in Darnold. I believe this is the best situation he's been in. And at the worst, if it doesn't work out, you're still a rebuilding team. You should be, you should have a pick in another quarterback class that could be really good as well. We're seeing more and more quarterbacks go like early. There's some really intriguing talents for next year's draft. Headlined by, I think the consensus top 3 would be in whatever order. For me, the order is Keaton Slovis, Sam Howell, and Spencer Rattler. But you've got some other interesting names. Malik Willis of Liberty has up there for Ty McShay, as we saw. Dalton Ritter of Cincinnati, But the Panthers do have Sam Darnold. I think Sam has had big flashes as a quarterback in New York with the Jets, despite the crap show he was having to deal with. He beat the Rams last year, despite the fact that he had no discernible weapons of any kind. It was, just a weird game. He's had some big games in the past. I believe in Darnold. But this year is make or break, for sure. Year 4 for him, this is make or break. That gets us down to the final 4. I'm going to put the Jets 29. I love Zach Wilson. I think Wilson's great. I think they're installing a great offensive system with Mike LaFleur, whose brother Matt is the coach for the Green Bay Packers. LaFleur was the offensive coordinator for Kyle Shanahan in San Fran last year. He's coming with Robert Saleh, who's a highly regarded coach, great defensive coordinator, defensive mind. The Jets upgraded their weapons. I think you're confident, or that you would be much more hopeful, but still, he's an unknown. We don't know how good he's going to be, but he's the favorite for that job, for sure. And then we're at the bottom 3, and this is peak hopelessness index right here. For me, as far as I'm concerned. Daniel Jones going into year 3, he's shown no discernible improvement or changes as a player. He's the same player he was when he got drafted. And he's going to have the best set of weapons and talent around him this year if people stay healthy. But I just don't believe in Daniel Jones. Like, Marcus Whitman was talking about his comp on his latest episode of his podcast, the Fully Inflated Football Podcast, or Fully Inflated, yeah, I think it's Fully Inflated Football Podcast. His comp for him was Ryan Tannehill, and this was before Tannehill had the bounce back the last 2 years in Tennessee. This was broken, ruined by Adam Gase, Ryan Tannehill. That was his comp for Daniel Jones, and Jones got drafted 6th overall. And he's no better. And inexplicable things have happened with him too. Like, you want to talk about a guy, he's kind of Winston light. He doesn't throw as many interceptions, but he fumbles more. That guy cannot hold on to the football. So I'd put him at 30 just because he has a little more track record than Jalen Hurts, who is 30. The Eagles are at 31. I didn't see Hurts as an NFL quarterback coming out. I saw the value in him as a second rounder and someone who can play the quarterback position, do some basic stuff, do some RPO stuff, and be a weapon like Taysom Hill potentially. I saw him as more of a weapon player. We'll see. Now, Hurts could really improve. They've got a new coach there. They've added some weapons. He'll have Devontae Smith there. Maybe a healthy Jalen Reagor. The offensive line will be healthier. They've added depth to that too. But I'm not a huge believer in Jalen Hurts as a starting NFL quarterback. And then, finally, we're going to get to the Texans at 32. I am confident that Deshaun Watson will not play much football for the Texans this season. Either because he does get moved somehow, or he is able to play a couple games towards the end of the season. This situation with Watson is, frankly, on this level, is unprecedented. He's going to end up on the commissioner's exempt list for sure. If I'm the Texans, I don't know if I want him associated with the franchise. If I'm another franchise, I don't know if I want him associated with the franchise. It's not like Rodgers. Like, there was a point where, they could get a king's ransom. I don't think anyone's stepping up for that right now. Watson's toxic goods right now. And then Davis Mills and you've got Tyrod Taylor, so maybe I should put him being there above Hurts and Jones. And maybe I'll do that. But Watson, everything is such a downside, it kind of takes all that away. Because you'll still have him hanging over your franchise even with that. So that's my 1 to 32. Houston's just in a crappy spot because Deshaun Watson, whether he's guilty or not of any improprieties, legally speaking, well, should I say, at least when it comes to actually harassing and assaulting people, if he had some self-control, he wouldn't be in this mess, and the Texans wouldn't have to be dealing with this situation. And then he was already disgruntled anyway. Houston's just a tire fire at this point. So, with that being said, that's my quarterback rankings. If you disagree with them, or have your own takes or whatever, please, this stream's about to end. Throw them in the comments. I read those after all my live streams. So, thank y'all for tuning in, either live or after the fact. I've been your host, Hunter King, Blind Eye himself. And I hope you have a happy Tuesday. Like, subscribe, bell for notifications. Once again, please comment. I like the conversation. And I will see y'all Thursday. Wish me luck that I don't choke singing on stage tonight. Because I'm mildly terrified. Okay, that's a little exaggerated, but I am excitedly nervous.